This is College Football Breakdown with Joe Lisi. Find him on Twitter at @GoForThe2. Joe, how you doing today?
Oh, I'm amped up for a week number 9 of college football. Great games on tap. I can't wait. I'm chomping at the bit, Drew.
Boom, let's get right into it. 12 noon Saturday. We got a Big 12 matchup, 143, 144, the rotation number. Oklahoma State versus West Virginia. Looks like Oklahoma State laying 7.5 pretty much across the board. If you shop around on SBR odds, you can find a -7 at UWager if you're looking to bet on the Cowboys. We got a 73.5 the total. This game's on ABC. How you looking to bet this Big 12 matchup, Joe?
Yeah, I really like Oklahoma State in this matchup. They've won the last two over the Mountaineers by 14 points per game. Won this game in Stillwater last year by a score of 37-20. You look at Oklahoma State, they survived on the road in Austin, picking up a 3-point victory in overtime. This is an offense that's averaging 191 rushing yards on the ground and passing for 392 yards through the air with their quarterback, Mason Rudolph, who's completing 66% of his passes, 2,650 yards, 19 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Drew, he has 4 big play wide receivers, James Washington, J.J. McCleskey, Aitman, and Stoner, that have combined for 121 receptions, 2,219 receiving yards, and 17 receiving touchdowns. They're going to be going up against a West Virginia defense that's giving up 261 passing yards per game, and more importantly, allowed 370 passing yards last week in the 38-36 victory over Baylor. I think that's the matchup you have to watch play out this coming Saturday in Morgantown. Secondly, when you look at West Virginia's offense, they're struggling to run the football consistently. Over the last 3 games, they're only averaging 101.3 rushing yards per game. I think that favors Oklahoma State's defense that's holding opposing offenses to 134 rushing yards on the ground. And I do feel that Oklahoma State does pick up a convincing 14-point or more victory on the road in Morgantown this coming Saturday.
All right, so Joe, on the Cowboys, -7, can find that at UWager right now. Moving on to the 3 o'clock slate, we got Kansas State and Kansas, rivalry game here in the Big 12. Looks like Kansas is catching 24, so Kansas State laying -24, 55.5 the total. This game on FS1, 3 o'clock Eastern time kick. Joe, how you looking to bet this one?
Yeah, I'm all over the Kansas Jayhawks here. You're looking at Kansas State. They've dominated this series in recent years. They've won 8 straight over Kansas by 30.2 points per game. They won this matchup last year in Manhattan by a score of 34-19. This is a Kansas State team that has lost 3 straight games to Texas, TCU, and Oklahoma, and more importantly, has allowed 362 passing yards over the last 3 weeks average going up against Kansas's offense. This is a Kansas team that has struggled in recent weeks. They got shut out by TCU and Iowa State in back-to-back weeks. In the last 3 games against Texas Tech, Iowa State, and TCU, they've been outscored by a total margin of 153-19 or 44.6 points per game. But it really is, for me, a rivalry game. Throw statistics out of the window. I think Kansas quarterback Peyton Bender, who's completing 54% of his passes, 8 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, can stretch Kansas State's defense vertically. If you're going to get Kansas's best effort, it's coming this coming Saturday in Lawrence. Kansas is averaging 224 passing yards per game. They're averaging 21 points per game. I think they strike the upset. I think this is the upset special. Look for the Jayhawks to get a very close 28-24 win over Kansas State this coming weekend.
All right, Joe, back in the big underdog, Kansas Jayhawks, and their quarterback Peyton Bender from Cardinal Gibbons High School in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. But we'll keep it on the 3:30 slate in the Big 12. TCU, Iowa State. Looks like TCU's laying -6.5. You can find a 7 right now on SBR odds, and that would be at Bovada. 48.5 the total. Joe, how are you looking to bet this one?
Another intriguing battle, a couple of factors that really, I think, favor Iowa State in this matchup. Since 2013, though, Drew, TCU's owned this series. They're 4-0 over Iowa State and have won those games by an average margin of victory of 25.2 points per game. They won last year in Fort Worth by a score of 41-20. You look at this matchup, though, TCU does have Texas on deck the following week. Ames is a very difficult place to play. This is an Iowa State team that got a convincing road win over Lubbock in Lubbock last weekend over Texas Tech, 31-13. More importantly, I like the way they're playing on the defensive side of the ball. They're ranked. Iowa State is ranked for the first time since 2005. They're holding opposing offenses to 120 rushing yards on the ground. They're +8 in turnover margin. They were able to run on the ground last week for 208 yards against Texas Tech's defense. And more importantly, Kyle Kemp, their quarterback, is completing 69% of his passes, 7 touchdowns, 1 interception. He's playing within the system. I like the way Matt Campbell has this team. Let's keep in mind, this is an Iowa State team that has lost 2 games this year to Iowa and Texas by a total of 13 points. Last year against Oklahoma State, Kansas State, and Baylor, they lost those 4 games by a total of 25 points. They're sitting at 5-2 overall. I think Ames is a hornet nest. I'm calling for the outright victory, 28-21. Iowa State gets the victory over TCU, ends the streak right here for TCU and Kenny Hill.
Nice play, Joe. And so, Joe, like in the underdog to win outright at home, for record-keeping purposes, we will give you the +7. You can find that right now at Bovada. Sticking to the 3:30 Eastern time slate, we got 179, 180, the rotation number. A big one here, Joe, arguably the marquee matchup of the college football weekend. We got NC State traveling to South Bend, Indiana to take on Notre Dame. Looks like it's Chris is hanging a 7, bet online a 7.5, favoring the Irish. 59 the total. This one on NBC. How you looking to bet it?
I like the underdog here as well. A couple of factors why I favor NC State in this matchup. They're coming out of a bye week, so they have an extra week of preparation for this ball game. And secondly, they did defeat Notre Dame last year in a monsoon in Raleigh, 10-3. You look at NC State's offense, they're a very balanced offense that's rushing for 177 yards on the ground, and they're passing for 290 yards through the air with their senior quarterback, Ryan Finley, who's playing lights out. He's completing 69% of his passes, 1,968 passing yards, 11 touchdowns, no interceptions. He has a veteran wide receiver core led by Jalen Samuels, Stephen Lewis, and Harmon that have combined for 115 total receptions, 1,358 yards, and 7 touchdowns. I think they could stretch Notre Dame's defense vertically. That's given up 235 passing yards to opposing offenses. When you look at NC State's defense, this is a solid defensive front led by their defensive end, Bradley Chubb, that can run sideline to sideline. They're holding opposing offenses to 92 rushing yards per game. You look at Notre Dame's offense overall, they're a one-dimensional offense led by Brandon Wimbush. They're averaging 317 rushing yards on the ground, only passing for 157 yards per game through the air. Wimbush is only completing 51% of his passes, 920 yards, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. I think that's a cause of concern for Notre Dame. Can North Carolina State, I think they can put Notre Dame into 3rd down and long situations. Notre Dame's only converting 38% of their 3rd downs. And more importantly, when I look at NC State overall, they're +8 in turnover margin and entered this game with 18 total sacks through 7 games. I don't think they'll fear Notre Dame in this ball game. They're a veteran team, and I'm calling for the upset. 31-24 on the road in South Bend. NC State gets the outright win.
Nice. Joe Lisi liking the underdog to win outright. And for record-keeping purposes, we'll give you the +7.5. Can find that right now on Bet Online. And Joe, yeah, you bring up a good point. You know, with NC State's defensive front, which is one of the top 10, in my opinion, in the nation, going against Notre Dame's kind of rush-oriented attack from multiple different positions, I think it sets up well for the Wolfpack.
I agree with you. And keep in mind, this is a confident team. They knocked off Louisville and Lamar Jackson at home. They kept him in the pocket, so they faced mobile quarterbacks. And from a defensive end perspective, Bradley Chubb is one of the most dominant defensive ends in college football. If they can contain Brandon Wimbush in the pocket and force him into third down and long situations. He struggled as a consistent quarterback. That's what Georgia was able to do in week number 3. Notre Dame only converted 3 of 17 on third down conversions. I think that's the matchup you want to see play out Saturday afternoon in South Bend.
Yeah, South Bend, it's a tough place to go in and win, but I like the matchup. And Joe, you're 21-13 overall in the season, so if you like it too, I think it sets up well. And guys, you make sure to shop around on this one because Bet Online will give you that extra half a point on 7, which is very important. So NC State plus 7.5, can find it on Bet Online. Last one here, Joe, we got the Spartans, Michigan State traveling to play Northwestern in the Big Ten. Minus 2.5 for Michigan State, 40.5 the total. This one on ESPN. How you looking to bet it?
Well, I'm not going to back down now. I like the underdog in Northwestern. I like Northwestern last week against Iowa. I like the way they're playing. Couple of factors about this matchup. They won this ball game last year in East Lansing by a score of 54-40. They put up the most points in East Lansing on a Michigan Spartan team at home. Clayton Thorson playing very well in the system this year, completing 60% of his passes, 1,688 yards, 8 touchdowns, no interceptions. This is a Northwestern team that's averaging 256 passing yards per game. They're also rushing for 136 yards per game on the ground, but over the last couple of weeks have put together back-to-back solid weeks. They rushed for 147 yards last week in the win over Iowa. 2 weeks ago, they rushed for 238 on Maryland. And keep in mind, Michigan State does have Penn State on deck November 4th. Are they looking ahead to that matchup? When you look at Northwestern overall from a defensive perspective, Drew, they're holding opposing offenses to 121 rushing yards on the ground. But over the last 5 weeks against games against Bowling Green, Wisconsin, Penn State, Maryland, and Iowa, Northwestern is holding opposing offenses to 94.8 rushing yards per game. You look at Michigan State last week in the win at home against Indiana, they only rushed for 89 yards on the ground against the Hoosiers. More importantly for Michigan State as well, over the last 4 games, they've only converted 17 of 57 third down conversions. That's 29%. When you look at Northwestern over the last couple of weeks, against Maryland and Iowa, they held both of those opponents to 32% on third down conversions. I like the way Northwestern involved Justin Jackson in the short to intermediate passing game. They're playing at home. They seem to be gelling and hitting on all cylinders at just the right time. And I like the way Pat Fitzgerald is coaching this team. I think Northwestern gets a close victory as well, 27-23 over Michigan State. I think they match up very well against the Spartans this coming Saturday in Evanston.
All right, Joe. So Joe is on Northwestern plus 2.5, NC State plus 7.5. We got Iowa State plus 7. Find that at Bovada. We got Kansas plus 24, and we got Oklahoma State minus 7. Find that one at UWagers. So Joe, off of a 4-1 week, 21-13 overall. Anything else college football betting wise before we shut it down?
No, I'm just tapped out now, Drew, but I can't wait for these games to play out. This is why we're talking about it each and every week. College football is the best game in town.
Yeah, best sport, definitely. Check out Joe Lisi on Twitter at @GoForThe2. For Joe, I'm Drew Martin. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to our channel. Now, we've put a lot of work into producing all these free videos, so please help us out and keep all our content free for you forever by simply liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. Now, not to mention, a visit to our industry-leading website will warm the hearts of all our SBR employees, especially myself. Now, the links are over there to the left, so do check those out. Thanks for watching.